So I'm very pleased to welcome and introduce Gwyn Nelson as our speaker. Gwyn's a programme manager at the Wales Coastal Monitoring Centre. Gwyn's been responsible for establishing and directing the centre since, I think, 2019, having previously worked extensively in commercial coastal surveying. And over the past few years, Gwyn and the team at the centre have developed a really comprehensive website and data platform based on extensive monitoring and an increasingly wide range of citizen science activities in Wales. So before I hand over to Gwyn, just a few sort of housekeeping notes. As I mentioned, we are recording the talk so that it can be shared on our YouTube channel. So if you could sort of keep your microphones muted until the end. If you do have any questions, then you're welcome to post them in the chat, and we can sort of turn to them at the end of the talk. Or alternatively, we can just open the floor at the end of the talk as well. So with that, then I'll hand over to Gwyn, and welcome, and thanks very much for your time today, Gwyn.
Thanks, Hal. Before you dip off, I'll just share my screen. If you could confirm it's coming through okay. Yeah, all good?
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah, thank you.
Great. Okay. So as Hal said, I'm Gwyn Nelson, the Programme Manager for the Wales Coastal Monitoring Centre. And thank you, Hal, for the opportunity to present today. It's always good to get a bit more outreach and hopefully some opportunities to overlap with people here today. I'll be presenting a strategic national approach to communicating coastal change in Wales. I don't want the title to be misinterpreted. We take a strategic national approach to coastal monitoring, and Hal asked if I could focus on our outreach projects and how we communicate the coastal change. So as a quick overview of the presentation, I'll introduce why coastal change matters. In Wales, how we've taken a strategic national approach and the governance and framework that exists for that, how we engage our public sector stakeholders, how we engage the public, and making that coastal data accessible and hopefully usable, which is our long-term challenge, really. So we know that climate change, with climate change, we anticipate getting increased storm frequency and intensity, and we know that the sea level has been rising for around 20,000 years. We've measured it for over 100 years at Newlyn in Cornwall. With that, we expect increased coastal flooding. This is some overtopping in Penarth, which is in South Wales, just around the corner from me. And as the waters come further inland, we'll have increased erosion going forward. This is the start of our problem, really. I've managed to get my hands on quite an impactful video. This was recorded by the risk manager for Denbighshire in the 2013-14 storm period. Hopefully it translates across teams. And the risk manager communicated that the majority of the damage, overtopping and flooding here, was done in a 20-minute window. It was that small because the storm surge coincide with high water on large tides, which is the worst case scenario. So there's a dramatic photo at the bottom here. It was actually taken from one of these streets back, looking up to this sea defence. That really gives you an indication of the scale of the devastation and impact on the local community. I also came across this really old image, which is in a similar area of North Wales, which lets us know that actually it's not a new problem, but we know it's going to be worse going forward. And of course, in Wales, we've got diverse geology. We've got some of the largest tidal ranges in the world. 60% of the population live and work on the coastline. And we've got Atlantic wave exposure. I came across a pub quiz fact that shocked even me. So I wanted to ask you guys if you had any idea where the largest fetch is to a UK coastline. So that's the largest distance across the sea that the wind can blow to generate waves. And the answer is nearly 14,000 kilometers from Antarctica to Pembrokeshire. which is pretty much a straight line. So there's a lot going on this page, but the first image that you can see here is this is the flood alert that was issued the night before that video I just showed you. So a significant amount of coastline in North Wales and England was at risk and hit by the storm surge. And of course, the beach is the first line of defence for our urban areas, so it's essential to know what coastal geomorphology is doing to inform our flood and coastal erosion risk management at these locations. And the response to the flooding in Denbighshire that we saw was to build this coastal defence that you can see shown in the image below. And the design was informed by the beach profiles here, which is data similar to what we collect now around Wales. So the images were supplied by Alec Jane, who's an engineer, Alec Jane, sorry, an engineer at JBA Consulting, and he informed me that without understanding the natural variation of the profiles, designs of coastal defences end up being very conservative, and that can add millions to a scheme, with, for example, adding additional tow rock armour to protect sites from undercutting, which is shown here. And of course, all this data that we collect is essential in building up models to understand or predict extreme wave and overtopping events and being able to withstand those to the future. I've got another quick example. This is actually a slide from our primary schools programme, but considering sea level could rise for the next 10,000 years, is upgrading sea defences a sustainable option? And that's a very difficult message to deliver. Sadly, the people of Fairborn in West Wales have been informed that sea defences won't be maintained from 2050, which has had impacts been drastic really on the local community. We can see from this map in the bottom left-hand corner, which is 1 in 200 year flood risk event from Natural Resources Wales, the town of Fairborn, which is close to Aberystwyth University, obviously. Largely sits in here, and of course there's infrastructure supporting neighbouring towns as the railway link comes through. So it's a very, very difficult challenge going forward. So how have we approached this in Wales? Well, the Welsh Government fund the Wales Coastal Monitoring Centre, which makes us a public sector organisation. The business case for us to exist was put together by 3 local authorities and the Welsh Local Government Association. So I'm managed by the consortium and report to the Vale Glamorgan Council, Gwynedd Council, Conway Council, and the WLGA. We also have an advisory panel, which includes the Wales Coastal Groups Forum, Natural Resources Wales, National Trust, Network Rail, Welsh Government, and we have a delivery team. So in-house we have surveyors. We use surveyors from maritime local authorities that we've trained up to collect data to our specification. So majority of North Wales is collected in-house, and we use contractors as well. The bulk of our surveys are actually done by commercial contract teams. Data hosting. So the English have an equivalent program which has been longer established than ourselves, and we tie in as much as possible to their work to make sure that our data overlaps well. And they also host all our data and make it available, so it's on both our website and downloadable in very basic ASCII formats on the National Network Regional Coastal Monitoring Programme website, which is NNRCMP here. Our key users are the maritime local authorities. So you saw I talked about Denbighshire and the data that was used for the coastal defence there. In reality, the local authorities tend to employ engineering consultancies to work with the data. And then the single biggest user of our data, with a whopping 50% on average, is the universities, which use the data for education and research. But we mustn't forget that why we're doing this in the first place, of course, is to support the people of Wales and hopefully provide the evidence base to make decisions going forward. So from a governance perspective, in 2020, the Welsh Government published the second version and latest version of the National Strategy for Flood and Coastal Erosion Risk Management. And the Coastal Monitoring Centre is mentioned in there. We have a direct measure, which is delivery of annual topographic surveys on behalf of coastal groups to measure change in the most at-risk coastal areas. And in terms of our strategic direction, we did a 1-year stakeholder assessment We're the risk managers of Wales, so there's 15 maritime local authorities in Wales who we engage with, and came up with our purpose, vision, and mission. So it's monitoring coastal change to inform sustainable risk management decisions. We want to be a role model monitoring centre that provides an accessible platform of understandable coastal process data, and we'll do that through delivering our evidence programme. That's managing all our surveyors out on site at the right time, collecting data in the correct way, and then optimising access to all that coastal data. So in terms of timelines, myself and Will were two full-time posts that were brought in 2019, and we started an undergraduate programme immediately, which gave us a full-time equivalent of 3 staff, and we set to work building the foundations for the organisation. We didn't have a single spreadsheet to our name, so everything that we did had to create from scratch, which was quite a lot of work in those early days. In 21-22, we gained a little bit of funding and bought a drone with a LiDAR scanner. And then in 22-23, we had an increase in funding, which allowed us to take on an extra person. So we currently have 4 FTE equivalents. And with other funding, we've also pushed through placements, including 2 funded placements with Aberystwyth Uni Robotics Department under the CES2 scheme, which means we've had 15 placements through, which is fantastic news. And at least 5 of those have gone on to get jobs in FSERM, so Flood and Coastal Erosion Risk Management, which we're really pleased about. And then last year, one of the most significant milestones for us was publishing our data platform, which I'll talk about later. We are coming to the end of the 2nd phase, and we're hoping to start a 3rd phase, which will also be a 5-year phase going forward. So there'll be a lot of work on that business case in the coming year. So if you're tasked to have a budget and then survey the Welsh coastline to understand what's going on over time and provide the evidence, it was quite an open book, and we had lots of options. One option could have been just taking a profile every kilometre of Wales, and that would have provided data, but that wouldn't have been the most effective way in the most at-risk locations. So what we did was we built our risk-based methodology and used a multi-criteria decision analysis, which is basically a big spreadsheet. There's already policy units in Wales which form part of the shoreline management plans. I'll come to that later, and there's 473 of those in Wales. So we had a spreadsheet which listed all the policy units and their geographically bound locations. This is an example of Swansea at the Mumbles. And then in that spreadsheet, we added columns and gave scores related to the following factors. So within the shoreline management plans, there were policies now and then policies at different epochs into the future, which recommended how that coastline should be managed, and we scored accordingly. We counted properties and infrastructure at risk, and to do that, you can see this blue line that represents the 1 in 200 year flood event. So we plotted that around the entirety of Wales and counted all the properties that fell within each policy unit to score. We counted all the properties that fell within 50 metres of the coastline, and we also factored the scoring in using the National Coastal Erosion Risk Model with erosion rates. And then beach behaviour, there wasn't a consistent data set because around Wales, because we didn't exist prior. So there was a desk-based study called Future Coast, and we scored according to that. We're currently working on our 2nd version of our risk score of Wales, which will use our own data to inform the beach behaviour element. So what does that risk scoring for Wales look like? What you can see here is the best way that I could find to represent this information. I really wanted to get the topography on there of Wales so we can see low-lying areas. Well, it looks like cloud shadow here, these darker patches. This is a population heat map, so it just gives you an indication. And then the coastline itself, if it's a small white line, that came up as a low risk, and a tall dark red line is a high risk. You might be looking at Aberystwyth, some of you here. But yeah, it gives you an indication. Cardiff's a great example. Low-lying land where lots of people live. That's high risk, and we should be spending our data, money collecting data at these locations. And then there are other areas where high cliffs, so the flood risk is really low, very stable cliffs, flood risk is low, erosion risk also low. Not many people live there. So if we collected lots of data there, it wouldn't really be of high value. We then had to standardize how the data was collected across Wales. So our team in-house are collecting survey data. We've got contractors collecting survey data, and we've got local authorities collecting survey data. It all needs to be collected exactly the same way so that it's interchangeable, and the outputs and deliverables all feed into the same format. We have key methods for collecting that data, but accuracies, repeatability, spacing are all identical across Wales now, so that all the data, once you've got to grips with some of the data, you can look at any data across Wales and all will be the same. If you were to meet us out on the beach, this is what we'd look like. Look out for any yellow bibs when you're on the beaches. Here's our in-house team. Alex is one of our previous undergrads. Our in-house drone and LiDAR scanner. And you might recognize this second beach at Abu Dhabi. It's probably not the tropical blue last time you visited this location. That's actually a color grading or height grading on a point cloud data set. But what this describes really well is a 14-kilometer stretch of coastline that's got high density LiDAR data collected. So it gives an indication of what we can collect and how much data we can collect and how valuable that data will be to look at when compared multiple surveys over the years. And then another kind of overwhelming slide, really, but I like this slide because collaborations have been really, really important for us in terms of being able to overachieve, I think, which looks great for Welsh Government as well, but is to use a management term, is often synergistic, that people can come together and create more than what they could have done on their own. So here's some examples of equipment that we've worked with: autonomous robots and vessels collecting bathymetric and LiDAR data. There's two projects here again. These are the Aberystwyth University projects, developing an autonomous robot to drive the beaches and collect height data for us. And this project in the middle was an autonomous camera which could be parked on the beach. You may even recognize this section of beach, and automatically detect the sand line against the structure in the background, which is important for coastal management. We could then get an indication of potentially what would be a trigger level, an important level that would investigate further work. So yeah, that's one of the projects. We worked with other organizations looking at satellite data. This was a project with BGS using an e-trike and scanning beaches just before drones took off, really. And then the CoastSnap project, which I'll come to, which is another collaboration which has been very fruitful for us. In terms of our stakeholders, I mentioned earlier about the national strategy for FSIM. So we're looking at a screenshot here, which is direct from the national strategy. Just wanted to explain a bit about the governance, really. So we report to Wales Coastals Group Forum, which is made up of chairs from the 4 coastal groups in Wales, which I'll explain, and ultimately feeds up to Welsh ministers. So in terms of our deliverables, we're procuring this data, quality controlling it, and supplying it. That then goes to risk managers in local authorities, and if they want to give it to consultancies, they can, but we're increasingly trying to help them make use of the data themselves, and Natural Resources Wales. And all the data is collected within the existing framework that is shoreline management plans. So the shoreline management plans are geographically bound. Within that, there's smaller policy units which are geographically bound, and we use those policy units as our survey units so that everything can tie directly through the whole system, and again, ultimately going up to Welsh Government via the Wales Coastal Groups Forum. Engaging public sector stakeholders. So I mentioned earlier that the most important person for us really are the risk managers at the local authorities, but this data is paid for by the taxpayers, so we want to make it all available. But we had to make sure that it was most value for the people sitting in the picture here. Our year-long stakeholder engagement assessment involved meeting with all the maritime local authorities individually, running through a questionnaire, taking the results, distilling those all down into a report which we fed back and then did multiple workshops to refine that even further and come up with our strategic direction, which we then got all the local authorities to work on. which is a long-winded process, and it took a year, and it's really difficult to get everybody together to spend the time. So I'm grateful for all the time. But I think the biggest learner for me was it really built relationships between the Coastal Monitoring Centre and all the risk managers. So we're very well connected within local authorities now. And then having their involvement helps their commitment towards our cause and what we're doing, and the support and onboarding, which is invaluable. This slide could have gone anywhere in my presentation, really. I struggled where to put it in, but I've talked about shoreline management plans a few times and thought for those that hadn't heard of them or weren't aware, I should probably explain. Back in the 90s, HR Wallingford did a study of the UK, and they broke the entire coastline into large-scale littoral cells, which became the basis of the shoreline management plans in terms of geographically bounding. And within Wales, we've got 4 shoreline management plans that overlap, and I'll just talk you briefly through one. So Lavernock Point starts in the middle or to the edge of the Vale of Glamorgan. So the Vale of Glamorgan actually sits on 2 shoreline management plans, and then it ends at St Anne's Head in Pembrokeshire. So as a large-scale littoral cell and area of influence, these local authorities needed to work together, and some of the other advisory panel organisations, Natural Resources Wales, Network Rail, etc., sit on this group, and they meet quarterly. They all chip in money and pay for a full-time post. Hannah was who was on a slide earlier and sits in our team. So within this region, the shoreline management plan was created with the recommended policies that I talked about earlier, and they're broken down into these policy units. So they are policies set for now and then epochs into the future, and the current policies available are for every stretch of coast to either advance the line, to hold the line, to realign, to manage realignment, or no active intervention, which is increasingly the more preferred option. Let nature do its thing and go back to itself. As it is, there's actually no advanced line sites in Wales. And then in terms of tools, it's just some examples. Again, a quick slide, which I'll not spend a lot of time on, available to risk managers, but increasingly adaptation is becoming a more go-to option. I'll just read that out. It means changing the way we live around and manage the coastline to allow us to cope with changing coastal situations like sea level rise. So moving on to communicating the coastal change. One of an early exercise that we did was considering our first principle as an organisation. What single thing could we do as an organisation that would provide the most value? And we used the Japanese 5 why. I don't know if you've heard of it, which is a management technique where you just ask yourself, why? What are you doing 5 times? So I'll just run you through that. Why are we collecting coastal monitoring data? We want to learn about coastal processes and coastal evolution. Why do we need to do that? To inform our shoreline management plans, defence design, and plan for the future. And why do we need to do that? Well, to protect the people and the properties and the infrastructure from flooding and erosion. And why are people and properties and infrastructure at risk? Because they were built in what are now high-risk locations. And why were they built in high-risk locations? We weren't educated about the risk at the time. I think if we spoke to the people at Fairborn before they bought their houses, or before even the houses were built there, and let them know about future risk, we would probably have a different situation than what we do today. But we do now know, so it's very important for us to make sure that we can educate people as much as possible so that we don't make the same mistakes, and that the costs and impacts of those mistakes compound going into the future. So we started a primary school program. This was a really fortunate collaboration. My daughter at the time was in Barry Island Primary School, which is very close to the coast, and I know they go to the beach regularly, so I asked the headmaster if I could come in and do some lessons. As it was, they were a trial school for the new Welsh curriculum that was coming in 22. So they gave me a teacher for the day, and we worked on a 12 lesson program and trialed it several times, which has been a fantastic success. So we offer this to primary schools, and we go in for one lesson out of the 12 lesson program, and we try and do a field trip as well. But we've had over 1,000 children complete the program, which is fantastic. So I've personally taught 1,000 children, which I would never have imagined going into this job, which is completely different from commercial surveying. But it's definitely been some of the most rewarding work that we do. And there's at least 1,000 kids we now know can look at a flood map and consider the impact going forward. The interesting bit for me, I think, going into schools is climate change in my generation is not something we talked about when we were younger and became a new term later in my life, but it's always been in the media and the news for these kids, so it's not new to them. They're fully aware of it. There is a climate anxiety which is discussed, so we emphasize on giving the kids the tools that they can use to just take away the anxiety. We look at the things that we can do to adapt to climate change going forward. So that's just the first example of good collaboration. The second one is the Coast Snap project, which is again been a huge success. This was developed by the University of New South Wales in Australia and is an off-the-shelf citizen science project. We'd seen the project and not engaged in it because we just didn't have resources as a small team. But the Wales Coastal Path got in touch with us and said, we've got a 10-year anniversary and we want to do some kind of citizen engagement. This seemed like the ideal tool. So the Wales Coastal Path have had the funding for the infrastructure in terms of the hardware that you can see in the images here. And we've developed the digital architecture and management for it. So how does this work? It's fixed point photography, really. We encourage the public to come to a sign, scan a QR code, and then place the phone in here and take a photo. So those images taken at exactly the same location every time can be compared over time. And they then get uploaded to our website. The very first sites that we did were all pointing at structures because we're really keen to develop a tool which will detect the sand line against the structure and help us understand how that sediment's moving in between our surveys. But we've now expanded because it's had such good interest from local authorities for other sites and a huge engagement across sites. So I'll just show you a bit more detail. Once the photos are scanned and uploaded, it all goes into our website, and then once a month, Ben, my colleague there, downloads all the data. He's developed a little bit of software to quality control the data. We do get some naughty images in there, so Ben has to remove those. And for safety's sake, we blur all the images. And because every camera has a different pixel resolution, a different lens, they never line up automatically. So a student in the computing department at Aberystwyth University did a project and did an image alignment tool, which we run as well, which is fantastic, saves a lot of time. Once they're all QC'd, Ben does a video time lapse for each location and uploads all the photos back to the website. So they're all online and available, which I'll show to you shortly. 2 weeks ago, we did a trip and installed another 20 sites whilst meeting local authorities across North Wales. Ben very kindly output this for me yesterday. So as of yesterday, we've had 5,197 usable images at 56 locations we've now installed, and a 600% increase in website traffic. So I don't think we could have paid a marketing company to get 8,000 visitors direct to our website. We haven't capitalized on that. Ben's also working on some education tools around climate change and flood and coastal erosion risk management, so that if people come to our website through this, they can go on and learn more, but that's still going on in the background. The graph's quite interesting. You can see the seasonality of the tourists or coastal visitors. And then outcomes so far. So this is an example of what we're trying to achieve from a technical point of view. This is Whitmore Bay in Barry. You can see these two images are directly comparable, which have been taken from the Coast Snap mount. Might be difficult to see. The sand level has changed slightly. In this one, some of the foundations are starting to show, which can be seen in this image also. As I mentioned, the sand line detection is something that we're working on. The more images we get over time will make this easier to train with the AI. And then we have multiple 3D scans of the structure as well to help us look at quantification of sand levels. This is my final slide, but it's not the end of the presentation. Sorry. I will go onto our website and show you some of the tools there. Last year we published our data platform, which I'd like to talk you through because we're really proud of it. Most people don't want to hear about it, but hopefully you'll be interested. We didn't really have enough resource to process all our data into bespoke reports for the local authorities in terms of coastal trends. And we were looking to develop a data platform. We also didn't really have the skill set to do that, but we were really lucky to come across the Office for National Statistics Data Science Campus, who at the time were running a data visualization accelerator program, and we won a place on that. So they provided us one of their team for a day a week over 12 weeks that helped us build the best approach to digital architecture and the skill set. That combined with large language models helping programming availability, we effectively have an extra programmer in the team, so we were able to process the data and automate a lot of what we do. So I'm just going to flick over to our website. If you haven't been on our website, we are wcmc.wales. You'll land on our homepage. The most important thing we do is supply data, which is the first biggest button, but there are other resources related to the education and survey resources. If you're interested in surveying on beaches, on the updates map, you can see which areas we survey, how frequently we go, how much data we've got at those locations. It's a little bit on CoastNap here. And our outreach, we were in Carmarthenshire at a schools event 2 weeks ago, which has just been published. This is us installing CoastNap sites along North Wales and a recent guest lecture at Cardiff University. So we try and get out involved in education as much as possible. I'm going to take you over to data. If you click the data tab, you will come to our data platform. And here we have a data platform wiki page, which I'm going to jump to quickly. It explains some of the terms that I've mentioned today, the shoreline management plans, and it also explains a bit more about our data. So at a point from a high water line, you can see all the back of the beach. Our profiles are either walked historically or from laser scans, we extract these individual profiles. Here's an example of a comparison of multiple profiles over time. There's only 4 across the space of 2 years here. And then we also cut these profiles at set datums, which are tidal datums based on local tidal ranges. From those cuts, we'll take a value for the cross-sectional area against the back of the beach so that we can look at how that cross-sectional area is changing over time. And that's what these plots show. This is most likely looking at the values, a mean low water spring, so the entirety of the profile down to the water's edge on the big tides like we've had this week. And a comparison of how that value trends over time. There's a little bit more information on our survey unit status. I won't go into a huge amount of detail now, but that's all here, and our hydrodynamic data. I will talk you through the data though. So if you come to our data platform, you could open into a bigger window here, which I've already done earlier. You'll land on this page. We've got 3 key buttons here, but it's a high level overview. And remember, this is targeted at, my bad. This is targeted at local authority risk managers. And having met with the risk managers, we realized that on average, through our questionnaire, those responsible for the coastline in Wales spend between 5 and 10% of their time on the coast. And they have a huge amount of responsibility in different areas. So we wanted to help reduce the time that they need to spend on the coast whilst helping them be more informed on the coastline. So this is a beach state from the latest survey tool, which allows them to see if the beach is in unusual state from a standard deviation, then it might be worth them looking at. But until that point, they don't need to do anything. These are all the survey units that we have data on in Wales. Click on a random one there, learn a little bit about that survey unit. When surveys are planned, let's choose one with some more data. Here we go. Size of the data sets that we've got, how far back they go. And then if you're interested, you can dig in a little bit more detail. So if we click onto profile lines, so each dot here represents profile lines. I'm going to zoom into Whitmore Bay because that was just in the CoSnap slide that I showed. So each dot represents a profile line which goes down to mean low water springs. Here is a beach hut that was in that photo earlier from the CoSnap where I showed the 3D structure, which is across here. So this profile here actually runs through that image. As we can see, the name of the profile, first record goes back to 98, so it predates us, and we've picked up historic profiles and are now adding to them since 2019, since we've been collecting data. And the total number of surveys at this location is 25, so that's line 3. The rest of these dots are smaller because they represent that only one survey has been taken at this location. If more surveys have been taken, then it's a larger circle, effectively. But we can dig in a bit more. Oh, there we go. Just remembered from me clicking in before. Line 3. So this graph has pulled up all the profiles that have been collected at this location over time. We can zoom in and get a feel for what's happening at the back of the beach relative to that seawall where most of the movement appears to be, and that area of interest. And here we can see the cross-sectional area to the datum of mean low water neaps cross time, which goes back 20 years worth of surveys. The colours give an indication of when the survey was taken because the beach profile will vary naturally on summer and winter as well. If I drop onto the hydrodynamics page, so that cross-sectional area plot is just pulled through. It's the same plot spread out a little bit. We have here, using 30 years of data, the average wave power and prevailing wave direction. If we look at these individual plots, we can click on them. That one's quite recent and quite low, relatively low level compared to the mix. So this gives us 30 days wave power in the build up to the date at which this survey was taken. And we can see that Storm Erik came through quite shortly before, which may have an influence on why that level is slightly low at that time. And we've also added in count of extreme wave events by periods, 1.25, 1 and 1 in 10 years. It just gives help a context to those return periods on the wave events. So that's our data platform. I just wanted to finish up by going to the CoSnap page. So this page is accessible from our menu at the top. When you QR code one of our signs, it will take you directly to this page. Hence, this kind of mobile friendly, mobile responsive top of the page where you upload your photos. Down here, we have a map which shows all the locations that we have CoSnap in. And there's a heat map underneath which shows the number of submissions. If there's low amount of submissions, it's probably most likely a new installation. And you can then dig in and have a look at the photos as well. So these are all our sites, 56 sites, I believe. Again, let's drop into that site that we looked at earlier. So this is Whitmore Bay. You can access all of the photos individually if you'd like to. There's quite a lot of difference in just these photos alone. And then I'll just hit play on time lapse to give you a feel for the work that Ben's been doing. I don't know how much of this is translating through. It's quite quick actually, but you can see how some of the images don't align particularly well. But we do our best with our tool. And there's, yeah, all the people are blurred out automatically as well. That's about it, Howell. I don't know if there's any questions or anything else people would like to see.
Fantastic. Thank you very much indeed, Gwyn, for taking us through your work and the resources that you've just finished up with there. That's fantastic. I'm sure there will be some questions, so I will unmute everyone, and yeah, and open the floor. Stephen, yeah.
Yeah, so that's great. Gwyn, love that talk and amazing resources developing there. I just wanted to go back to your risk score system.
Yeah.
How was risk defined? I think you said something to do with risk of flooding, erosion rate, and exposure of population to those risks. Is that correct?
Yeah. So yeah, it wasn't an easy process, and we needed to be fair across Wales. But effectively, we're flooded from flood branch, which means we're interested in locations where people and infrastructure are going to be impacted. So where nature's doing its thing naturally, that's not somewhere that we're going to focus. And we've also not omitted, but areas that have suffered are caravan parks. So, for example, in Ceredigion, Newquay Beach initially wasn't part of our program, but there's significant erosion on Newquay Beach, which has a significant impact on the tourism industry, and tourism is separate from FSERM, and of course caravans can be moved. So they weren't included from our scoring initially. As it is, when we expanded, we got extra money in 22 when we took on the extra person and we increased our program. We then included Ceredigion, but there are still, for example, caravan parks around Wales which are outside of the program.
Okay, yeah, I mean that's fair enough. I mean, you've got to prioritize where to invest your time and efforts, I guess. I mean, as an academic, particularly with the project we've started, we're, I guess, more interested in the rocky coast, because change is one way there. You take rock away, it ain't coming back. On a sandy bit of coast, it potentially can recover. I mean, in many cases it won't, of course, or it will adjust in a particular way. So yeah, but there's some interesting, I think you used the word synergy. There's potential for synergy there for, I guess, our more academic interests in rates of geomorphological change on unpopulated bits of coast, let's say, and the more applied work you're doing here, particularly in terms of data archiving and your public communication program. I think there's lots of things we can learn there.
Yeah, we'd love to overlap where possible. We've also got on our data page, we have a map at the bottom where we want to signpost to as much coastal data that's freely available. So if you have any data sets or you want to be linked on there at all, so you can go on there, and we've just looked up coastal research and just pointed to academic papers. There's quite a lot of historic data that we've archived that local authorities collected before we existed, and that's also available through that. You can hopefully search for it, get in touch with us, and we can pull out the archive and give it to you.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks very much, Stephen, for the question. There's a question in the chat from Ikenna. Says, many thanks, Gwyn, for the talk. Really cool pictures from CoastSnap. I believe interaction with the public is a big part of your job. What is your relationship with the public like? Any challenges, and how do you overcome these challenges?
Yeah, really good question. Actually, interacting with the public is not our remit. So the school stuff, the CoastSnap stuff, we haven't been tasked to do that. And the outreach is the responsibility of Natural Resources Wales, and hence they have the map with the shoreline management plans on. They produce the tidal flood risk model. But as you can see, we went through that first principles exercise and realized if we had educated people in the past as a coastal monitoring centre, if nobody was at risk, we wouldn't need to exist. It would be all money that's being spent. It's money being spent unnecessarily, potentially. So education, we've put it to the top priority as ourselves, but it's a secondary function. Our first function is collecting coastal data. So we're not in the firing line, really. The local authorities are in the firing line, and there are lots of issues around the coast. Fairborn in particular is huge for obvious reasons. People's livelihood, their entire worth are in those properties, and that there's young people there who can't get mortgages because the houses can't be mortgaged in areas. There's a lot of really difficult things going on there. So I'm not a social scientist and I'm not public facing. So the only challenges we have really is when we're out wearing yellow bibs on the beach and people mistake us for other people, that we've had some aggressive individuals who are just upset with local authorities, and we've been out surveying in neighbouring local authorities and we still get it in the neck from the public, because people do just get upset and need to direct at someone. Yeah, so I'm sorry, it's not really our remit. We haven't got a good case example for you there.
Thanks, Dewi.
Yeah, thank you. Really enjoyed the talk. Lots of really great stuff. I'm looking forward to going through it. I'm just wondering with the data as well, you may have answered this already, so apologies if you have, but in terms of detail, looking at things like size of sediment and angularity of sediment, I know you've shown movement of prevailing winds and so on, but I'm just thinking, based on things like longshore drift as an impact on various places, I wonder, do you go down to that kind of level? And do you look at geology? I would imagine, you know, would you be able to pinpoint somewhere on the Welsh coast and know exactly what geology you have in that section, for example? Do you go to that kind of detail?
Great question, Dewi. No and yes. So everything that you've talked about, I would love to have that level of detail. So the teams that we send out are commercial surveyors, commercial survey companies, and we're not collecting samples to be analysed for particle size at all. But as part of the specification, there are feature codes for every point. So for every data point on those graphs, if you go onto the profiles and hang over it, there'll be a feature code which will tell you as part of, sorry, I'll go back a stage. There's a contractor page under resources on our website. In there is our specification. In there we have a list of the feature codes which go from seawall, sand, mud, shingle, cobble, boulders, so that there's an indication of the sediment types. Yeah, we can't afford and haven't got the tools to document it scientifically. We would love to. We're looking at, on the next stage of our data platform, to include information on the geology as well, and the superficial geology.
Okay, thank you.
Fantastic.
And if you'd like to get involved in helping with that, Dewi, we'd be very happy for that too.
I wouldn't mind getting involved in the education side of it if you are looking for somebody. You know, that's my background, but just thought I'd throw that in, especially on the West Wales coast.
Brilliant. No, yeah, we definitely would be up for that. Maybe we can be connected and at least open a dialogue on it. Thank you.
Fantastic, thank you. And unless there are any other questions, we can perhaps bring things to a close, because we're getting close to 3 o'clock. It is exciting to see the new CoSnap on the bandstand, I think, in Aberystwyth. I think it's new.
Yeah, we put it in, was there 2 weeks ago, Monday 17th.
Excellent. So as you probably know, the kind of movement of sediment up onto Aberystwyth prom is quite happens quite often at the moment, and causes quite a bit of discussion in Aberystwyth. So it's really great to see that, and hopefully that'll be useful to see, to understand more about the processes that are going on there. So great, fantastic. Thank you so much once again, Gwyn, for giving your time this afternoon. We will, and for such an interesting talk. We will put the recording on our YouTube channel in due course. So please do share it with others that you might think would be interested. And yeah, just for me to say thank you for attending the talk, and do remember to head over to the British Society for Geomorphology's website for more information about the BSG's work. And there's still a bit of time to vote in the League of Landforms, I think, before we announce the winner, I think. So remember to do that. So thanks very much, everybody, particularly Gwyn, and have a good weekend.
Thanks, Hal. Thanks for the opportunity to come today, and the good questions.
Thanks all.
Bye-bye.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Bye.